Coming to you from the firing line of unsolicited feedback. You know that place where everyone's an expert in your life or on your life. Today we're talking about how to handle criticism without falling apart. Why does it sting so much? How do you separate what's helpful from what's just noise? And how can you actually grow from it instead of shutting down? John Michael swears he's learned more from his harshest critics than from his biggest fans. And Clayton thinks most criticism is actually garbage and should be ignored. And I got a story about that one piece of feedback that changed everything for me. This is the All In Podcast. Bada bing, bada boom. Bing, bada bing, bada bing, bada boom. Bada bing, bada boom. Fellas, today we're talking about a fun topic, criticism. But before we get started, I want us to define a couple of terms, right? Because we can use them interchangeably, and I actually think they mean different things. So what's the difference between criticism and feedback?
I was just going to say that Spindrift is the superior sparkling water. I just want to make that statement boldly.
That's a good piece of feedback.
Yeah,
right.
I just want to go ahead and lock that in as a legitimate take. Spindrift being the best seltzer water. Moving to feedback as a legitimate option. Feedback, I think, let's just define the term. It's giving someone a response to the actions that they've committed. Criticism, I would put it under the umbrella of feedback. So it's like feedback as a universal, and then the particular. Man, philosophy's coming out here. Come on. First time this has helped me in my life. The particular would be criticism as potentially negative feedback as a response to how someone has acted, actions they've made, things they've done. That's me.
So you're saying it's criticism's a part of feedback, kind of like all boys are human, but not all human are boys.
Yep.
All feedback.
All criticism is feedback, but not all feedback is
criticism. Interesting. Yeah, I think, it's feedback is something that's constructive, but then that gets confusing because then there's such a thing as constructive criticism. So I don't know the difference between constructive criticism and feedback necessarily, but giving someone good feedback gives them, a roadmap to growth, I would probably say. Whereas I think when we're trying to define our terms here, I think what we're trying to say about criticism is that it's more of just like pointing out the negatives. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think what's interesting is when you hear feedback, I don't necessarily think positive or negative. I just think kind of neutral. And then the type of feedback you give could be positive or it could be negative.
Yeah, whereas I feel like criticism is always going to be negative.
100%.
Right. Yeah, according to Forbes magazine, in the headline I read, is feedback focuses on the future and criticism focuses on the past.
Ooh.
Which kind of lines up with some of the things we're saying, right? Like feedback focuses on like, hey, here's what we want to see more of. Even if it's like, hey, you did this thing, but what if we change it to this thing? Versus criticism being like, hey, you did this really poorly.
Where do you think the word feedback comes from? You ever think about that?
I'm going to feed off your back.
That, I don't know. Let's get some etymological definitions here. Can you use it in a sentence?
So we're not saying that criticism is a bad thing. We're just saying it's the negative form of feedback, right? Or are we saying that you should try to give more positive feedback that could be critical, but critical also is criticism?
Yeah, I feel like feedback can be critical, but as long as it focuses on like the positive, and again, I don't mean like, hey buddy, that was so good. Yeah. Like not that type, but just like, hey, this went poorly. How can we change that? How can we do better? Like when we frame it like that, I think it's feedback because it's like, hey, how can we actually improve on something? And it can be critical because it was critical to say, hey, you did a really poor job in this.
Right.
But when it just stops there,
yeah,
I think that's when it's like unhelpful and just stays under criticism.
The boys in the back, the guys running this show for us, They're pinging my line right now, giving us a great definition for feedback. It's going to blow y'all's minds. You ready for this? The term feedback originated in mechanical engineering to describe systems that regulate themselves.
Feedback. Never would have known that.
That's fascinating.
Wow. You know, I kind of knew that being an engineer, but not being mechanical. You know, I wasn't entirely sure where it came from.
Yeah.
You know.
You're halfway there.
Yeah. So, I now that we have our definitions, right, I want to, and again, before we get into like some of the meatier things, from there, I want to give some tips to our listeners on when is feedback actually helpful.
Is there a point where you're and I might answer my own question here actually, a point where too much feedback is actually unhelpful? And I think that it is. I'm just thinking about this podcast, for example. If the boys in the back kept on telling us after every episode what we did wrong, what we did right, I think I would start overthinking it when we're actually doing the recording versus at the end of a day of recording, for example, if they said, hey, here's a few things moving into your next recording that you should work on.
Yeah, kind of reminds you of the golf swing.
Yes.
You know, and when you have too much going on in there, you can't do everything.
Right.
Right. And so when you're getting too much feedback, it's like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
That's
can I
what
hit
it's like
everything?
to get feedback from Clayton on my golf swing. He's like, I'm like, Clayton, what do I change? And he's like, everything.
You don't have a golf swing. You have a baseball swing while you're holding a golf club is the problem.
And that is why everything goes wide right by a far margin.
Okay, to the point about too much feedback, honestly, I'm thinking, you know, the people in your life that are going to give you feedback there's probably a couple different places, really. Your family, the people that you're closest to, your closest friends, and then in the professional workplace as well. And I'm just thinking about my own relationship with my wife. You know, it's good and it's necessary in marriage to give feedback either about, you know, something that needs to change, you know, in the home, or feedback in the way that we're relating to each other. But you live with the person. You know, you're going to see all of their strengths. You're going to see all of their weaknesses. And if you're constantly, there's just some things that you have to let go, is essentially what I'm saying. You know, and so you kind of have to pick and choose what are the things worth addressing, and what are the things worth letting go at the same time.
I think you bring up a good point with the type of people that you're getting feedback from. I think a helpful description here is a prerequisite for feedback is trust in the relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
So if I'm the worst thing is getting feedback from someone that you don't trust, because I don't trust them as an individual, which means, frankly, I'm not going to trust a ton of what's coming out of their mouth directed at me, even if it's positive. Because I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know me. You don't know where I've been. You don't know what I've been through.
You know my story. You know my swag, not my
You don't know my
story.
swag. So I think trust is a prerequisite for feedback, both positive and negative.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear from y'all of what's some of the funniest feedback or criticism that you've gotten in the past.
Oh, can I jump in here?
Please.
First? So I think feedback could take a variety of forms. There's kind of offhanded feedback where someone's not necessarily meaning to give you feedback, but they say something kind of offhanded that it's like, oh, wow, that's actually what you think. In my job, I do a lot of video calls. Probably a lot of our listeners are in that same boat. And the hard part about video calls is you never really know the size of the individual. And so I was working with a client who we had done a variety of video calls over the years. And I prefer a standing desk. You know, I'm a good Gen Zer. I care about my hips. And I showed up to an in-person meeting with this client. And the first thing he said is, wow, you're a lot shorter than I thought you would be. And I was like, that's feedback right there. Like, he is telling me, you come off as 6'4", but you actually are 5'8".
Love how you turn that into as you come off as 6'4". But it's also, it reminds me of earlier this morning, we were talking about the gym.
Yeah.
And Clayton made a reference to pump covers. And Joe Michael, you just looked at him and you said, how do you know what pump covers are?
Insinuated
What is that supposed to
he is not ingrained in the fitness culture.
You have never been to the gym in your life.
For anyone who doesn't know, like Clayton, what a pump cover is, it is kind of a oversized t-shirt that you wear as you begin your workout. And then you tear it off to show the pump that you're having. And usually under that, you're wearing a sleeveless shirt.
Yeah.
To make sure that the AK and the M16 are showing.
Well, I don't have pump covers. I just wear tummy covers. You know, there's just a little extra room around the tummy. It kind of hides.
You know what my dad calls that? He calls it the gentleman's cut. He's like, I only buy polos that have gentleman's cut. A little room for activity.
The opposite of you guys remember those Under Armour shirts?
They showed everything. They showed everything.
It was great. There's a comedian that has this whole joke about how for plastic surgery, when you know how they cover you with a marker, and they're like, oh, here's what we're gonna go after. He's like, they should just put people in those shirts, and you can tell, like, hey, it's pretty clear what we're going after here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Glenn, what about you? Do you have any funny feedback or criticism?
You know, I had several bosses of mine have told me, Clayton, you work too hard.
You care too much.
And sometimes I just don't know what to.
And your biggest weakness is actually your biggest strength.
You know, this isn't necessarily a funny one, but you know, it's common to hear this from my wife. Frankly, I've heard it from other people in my life, but it's not what you said, it's how you said it. And I think that's probably 90% of the arguments in my marriage is it's not what you said, it's the way that you said it.
Your tone, body language.
Do you have any example of any funny examples off the top of your head?
Come back to me. I'll think of one.
It's not what you said. It was the fact that you're wearing an Under Armour tight shirt when you said it.
I can't take you seriously. I think for me, this is not in the same vein as y'all, but still, I just look back and I was like, wait, what was that? I was interviewing for a job once, and I remember being kind of nervous beforehand. But it was a different type of job than I've had before, and it was a more professional setting, you know, and so I really wanted to, you know, just be a little more button up and just be professional, be, you know, level-headed, and just really make sure that I knew my stuff. I thought the interview went great. I ended up getting the job, but I do remember that afterwards, like, hey, just a quick piece of feedback. We think you could have been a little more joyful during that interview. I don't know if they say joyful, but they were going after that. And I just remember thinking, like, how is that helpful? Like, we're in a job interview. You know,
I'm supposed to be professional.
I'm trying to be professional. What do you want me to just be like, what?
Next interview, you showed up shirtless.
You will not believe what happened. It was amazing. I was just, that's something that always stuck with me that I thought was really funny. But to kind of close this criticism versus feedback loop, going back to criticism, why does it hurt so much?
I think as fellas, as members of the male gender.
Hey, all boys are human.
That's right.
But not all human are boys.
That's right. I think that we struggle to take criticism because we take it as an attack on our identity. So if my identity is that I'm a great employee, I'm successful in my role, I'm a high performer in my role, when I get negative feedback in that role, what it does is I take it initially, and I'm one of those people that I feel like I do not do well with criticism in the moment. My first thought when someone gives me criticism is like,
you hate me.
Like, no, that's incorrect. And then as I sit back with it, it starts to sink in a little bit. But I think when I hear criticism, I take it as an attack on my identity as a good employee, as a high performer, as someone who's good in their role. When in reality, it's not an identity statement. It's just a quality statement. And qualities form our identity, but it's not a criticism of my identity. It's a criticism of potentially how I'm performing in that.
I think another aspect of it too is that taking criticism requires a level of vulnerability and humility, because when you're receiving criticism, it might be the case that someone is telling you something about yourself that you didn't know about yourself. and that the image that you have of yourself is kind of being broken a little bit of like, oh, I didn't know that I did that. And to your point, John Michael, sometimes it's like, no, I don't do that. Right. You want to deny it and reject it. But I would say too, honestly, I feel like people, in regards to receiving just feedback in general, it's really hard to take negative feedback, criticism. But I would say people also have a hard time receiving positive feedback. Like when someone is like affirming, the good things in you, you're just kind of like, I don't know what to say. Like, I don't know what to do.
It is really funny because when someone does give me constructive criticism, right? Like actionable feedback of like, hey, here's where you messed up or here's what you can improve on. I'm like, you don't know. I'm killing it. You don't know me. But on the same vein, whenever I receive something positive, I'm just like, whatever. Like they don't know. Like, it doesn't matter. And so no matter what, I'm so prideful that whether it's good or bad, I don't believe what they're telling me.
I don't believe you either way.
Yeah. Great. Well, give us some feedback, some constructive criticism in the comments. Tell us some of the funniest criticism you've received, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Hey, this is Clayton from the All In Podcast. What if I told you that God was moving in places that you've never even imagined? That's exactly what you'll see in the new series Where Love Leads, a 5-episode miniseries brought to you by Focus. Travel with us across the world to see people whose lives have been transformed by Christ and see the power of mission come alive. Tap the link or scan the QR code to watch Where Love Leads now in the Seek Replay app.
All right, so we've been talking about feedback versus criticism. Why does it hurt? Why can it hurt? But I also want to talk about what can we do about it, right? John Michael, you once told us that you learn more from your biggest haters than you do from your biggest fans, right? I'd love for you to kind of jump into that and tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think feedback stings, but staying where you are hurts even more. So I think about some of the toughest superiors I've had, and I don't necessarily mean just in the workplace. I actually think back to my high school baseball coach. He was a tough-nosed guy, kind of scary. He was also a short king like myself, but he was jacked. Like you'd see him in the weight room benching 2 45s on each side, throwing on another 45 after he took his pump cover off. But he was very tough on me, very tough on me. But I don't think any coach I had previously was able to get more out of me as a player than this coach was, because I took his criticism as a sign of his respect for where my game could go. So he kind of saw, here's the level that I see you playing at. Here's where you are currently. I'm going to push you so hard that one of two things has to happen. You either break down, which is a risk, or I push you so hard that you achieve this level that I see in you. And what's funny is, as a supervisor of people now in the workplace, one of the biggest pieces of feedback I've gotten is your expectations for me are so high that I don't think I could live up to them myself. And I had to take that personally too, as an area of my own criticism as a leader. And that really helped me as a leader to actually try to coach people to their goals and not my goals for them.
That's great. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is wonderful, right? It's good. It's good feedback for us and for our listeners. What are some practical ways you can actually take the good things out of criticism, out of feedback, and apply it while leaving the rest behind, right? While leaving the stinging behind.
Let me understand your question. You're saying how do you respond to feedback well? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, what are some practical ways to actually receive feedback and try to find the good thing in it?
Yeah. Well, I think, John Michael, what you said earlier is a great point, where you said, in the moment, I don't want to receive the feedback, especially if it comes out of nowhere. Like if you're giving feedback to somebody, it might be helpful to say beforehand, like, hey, I'd love to give you a little bit of feedback here, instead of just jumping into a criticism,
To just jump off what you were saying, I think taking a step back after the feedback.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
Is where you were going.
That's where I was going. Is that when you receive the feedback, the initial reaction might be oftentimes one of, I'm frustrated at this, or I feel insecure about this. And when you're feeling that way, you just kind of want to deflect and you want to blame, or you want to ignore, or you just want to, reject what's being told to you. And so it's helpful when you're receiving feedback just to have that presence of mind of just like, okay, I'm going to listen to what you're saying right now. I have emotions that I'm feeling in the current moment, but this is something that I probably need to go home and think about later, once my emotions have kind of died down a little bit, and then I can take a step in responding to what's been said to me, and probably even address the conversation with the person that was giving you that feedback at a later time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And what I would add to that is, and I've experienced this plenty of times, right? Well, I'll have like a really strong reaction to feedback initially. Mm-hmm. And as I step back, something that I like to remind myself is, hey, I don't know if this is true or not, but let's just pretend that person had the best intention in mind. What would it look like for me to apply these things? What would it look like for these things to be true? And I think that always, now, something takes me a little longer to get there than I would hope, than I would want. But that helps me kind of reframe, like, okay, let's just leave my embarrassment, my pain, whatever it is, at the table, and just step back and be like, okay, with what they said, if I were to apply that, what would change? And then that helps me be able to compare, oh, that actually would be a positive change. What have been sometimes, so you use the baseball example, and I don't know where that ended up. I know you've shared with our listeners that you were really excited to play college baseball, right? But what are some other examples of a time of your life where you've actually implemented the feedback and have seen growth from that?
I went to a high-level public speaking training about a year ago, and it was led by someone who's given multiple TED Talks. So, very knowledgeable in the world of public speaking. And what was interesting is before the training, they asked for people who attended the training to send some film ahead of time of them public speaking. And so they could kind of go through and look at, all right, what's your style? What are you good at? Maybe what do you struggle at? And then we would go and practice in front of these folks. And I will say this individual who gave the TED Talks was really critical of a lot of things I do when I'm public speaking. One of the things she was most critical about is that I'm very energetic when I speak in public, so I move a lot. Part of it maybe is some ADHD deep down in there. And she's like, I just want you to stay planted when you speak, because when you move so much, it really affects the listener's ability to concentrate on what you're saying, because they're distracted so much by your movement, it's taking away from the words you're saying. It was so hard for me though, because it was like the golf swing example of earlier, of it completely made me overthink how I was performing. But as I kind of began to stay planted a little bit more, I could actually more adequately think about what I was going to say next and deliver the point with clarity, instead of this kind of hyper aggression form that I had been doing. The other thing though was there was some feedback that they gave me that I frankly didn't think was good feedback. So I'm one of the feedback they gave was that your voice is sometimes too loud. And, I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard that from my wife as well.
Your voice gives off 6'4".
Couldn't agree more. But I didn't like that feedback, because I felt like part of being an effective speaker was being able to communicate with passion, with zeal. And so I was like, I think I'm actually going to leave that feedback at home. I don't think I'm going to take that into my repertoire. So there's also a reality of sometimes you get feedback that you're like, I think that's just false. Like, I don't think I'm actually going to do that, because maybe it's pride, or maybe it's just actually a real recognition of what I'm good at, and I want to lean into that. Yeah. So that could take us to a next point of like, when do you know whether to ignore that feedback or not?
So I'm relating a little bit to what you're talking about with the public speaking thing, because I just started a new role myself in major gifts fundraising. And, I've fundraised, over the course of the last, 8 or 9 years, but I haven't done this specific form of major gifts fundraising before. And so part of my training is, when I'm meeting with, current benefactors or, potential future benefactors, I'm going with someone that is a little bit more experienced than me, and they do a great job of just like allowing me to run the meeting, and then afterwards asking questions of like, what do you think went well? What do you think you could have done? What you could have done better? How did you think this particular part of the meeting went? And they're asking the questions from a place of expertise. They're experienced themselves, and so there's coaching that's happening there, and I think it's an interesting point that when you're a public speaker, and there's people that are more experienced than you in public speaking and have trained other public speakers. You're going to allow those people in your life to coach you, and as you're growing in experience and things like that, you could probably say, well, I hear what you're saying when you're giving me that feedback, but also, I think I want to change it a little bit of what you're saying. You can you have a certain experience level or expertise yourself. When you're in sports, I played golf growing up. I had a swing coach, and I wasn't in a position to say, they're like, hey, you got to take the club head back like this. I'm like, no, well, I think I'm gonna do it like this. It's just like you listen to your coach. But then when it comes to more like interior things or personal things of just like, hey, whenever you're in this situation, you come across this way, or you tend, sometimes you speak in a tone that is condemning, in this way. Or sometimes it seems like it's those pieces of feedback where it's like, okay, I have all these coaches in my life. I have professional coaches, athletic coaches, John Michael, you're training for a High Rocks event right now down in Dallas. And, you've got a coach there that's helping you to become, the athlete and the competitor that you want to be in that event. And it's like, we allow ourselves to be coached in those situations. But, it's a lot harder for us when it's those personal things. It's like, why don't we allow ourselves to have like a life coach, like a spiritual coach that's able to draw those things out of us. But I think to go back to your original question, it's just like, when do you choose to ignore it? I think that you also probably have to receive feedback within like a certain context. It's like, okay, is this something that, if it's one of those more personal things, is this something that multiple people are telling me in my life? Is this something that maybe just one person is telling me in my life? For the public speaking things, like, okay, this is this person's opinion. Let me go to other people and ask them the same question. And if I'm receiving it from multiple parties, maybe that's a time when I actually need to, address the change that needs to be made. But I would feel like you'd probably want to seek out advice for that situation that you're talking about and ask other people if this is something that they think you should change as well.
But sometimes you don't need to ask other people, and you just know that it's true, right?
It's garbage.
No, the other way around. Sometimes I'm like, I just know this is true, right? And I think the best feedback, criticism I've ever gotten was, and I think I need this every so often for myself, is just something a little sharp that just cuts right through every wall I've put up. And this was a trusted friend, a spiritual director, a mentor. And we were meeting, and I was just kind of filling him in all these problems that I'm having. And he just looks at me and he says, Jose, you need to stop being a little crybaby. Now, he used different words than crybaby, but that just cut right through the core. I didn't need to ask anyone else. I knew that he was 100% correct. I knew that I was just victimizing myself. All these things that were happening, I was making myself the victim. And sure, maybe I still sometimes fall into that, but that completely changed everything for me, including how I receive feedback or criticism in the future, right? And that has really pushed me into this avenue of do something about the feedback that someone's giving you, whether right or wrong, right? It's whether change or what prove them wrong type of thing. Now, we need to be careful with that prove them wrong mentality. So that, I think that was a moment where I was like, this is absolutely feedback that I need to take with me. But with that, there's absolutely a lot of moments where people will be like, hey, can I give you some feedback? And you're like, sure, who are you? And then they give you something and you're like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. So Clayton, I'd love for you to speak into this. You were telling us how you think a lot of times criticism is kind of bogus and you just need to leave it at the door.
Well, I think I do think that that's true. I think that, I mean, it's just the culture that we live in right now. Everybody wants to critique everybody. You know, no one's willing to look at themselves and make changes within themselves. Everybody wants to point at the other person and say, you did this wrong. You know, you should have done this differently. You know, you whatever it is. And I think that that's something that's happening in our culture right now, is just that no one is willing to be reflective and to look at themselves and say, what do I need to change about myself? Everything that's wrong with the world is everybody else but me. Everything that's wrong with the world is all those institutions. You know, everything that's wrong with the world is all the decisions that everybody else makes in their life. And that's the exact opposite of the Christian life, which is that the problem with the world is me. You know, like I'm the broken one. I need to look at myself and make changes within myself. And I just think people are way too quick to just be condemning and critical of other people without first taking a look at me, myself, and I.
Absolutely.
I think it was Thomas Jefferson potentially that said, when I look at the world, I see the greatest problem is me.
I think that was Ben Franklin. But there's that quote from Teddy Roosevelt, the man in the arena speech that he gave. It's not the critic who counts. It's the man who's in the arena, who's marred by blood, sweat, something along those lines.
He is my favorite founding father of this country.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt.
I've never actually read the whole thing, but I've seen, in like little graphics of it on like Facebook before.
His signature on the Declaration of Independence is outstanding.
The one that's so big.
Yeah, it's just, some would call it a John Hancock, actually.
Yeah, it's so crazy that Teddy Roosevelt signed that and called it a John Hancock.
It's wild.
He went back in time. So I think what we're getting to, right, and some of the things you were pointing out is, how can we stay confident and not let the opinions of others derail us while still accepting feedback?
Yeah.
Right. So how do we balance that line?
I think going to people that really know us and having the ability to ask for feedback, that's how you go from a mediocre player to a top level performer, is that you're not waiting for feedback, you are seeking out feedback. So in every moment, you're like, hey, how did I do in that? Give me some feedback. Was it good? Was it bad? Where do you see my weaknesses? Where do you see my areas of growth? As a supervisor, I love working with people who ask those questions. And I think working with and having friends to where you can calibrate how your view of yourself matches with how you're coming off is a valuable element to staying firm in that identity. The other thing is, oftentimes we don't know how we're coming off to people.
That's true.
And so we need trusted friends to be able to say, hey, you think that you're coming off with a sense of confidence, but really you're coming off with a sense of cockiness. And when it comes from a friend who's actually seen you in different environments, that's going to land.
Do you think you can, what's the best way to give feedback? Like, can it be done over email, via text? Snapchat.
I prefer a text with a hidden ink, so they don't know it's coming.
And the subject line on.
Subject line says
feedback incoming.
Feedback incoming. Invisible ink.
Alert.
Invisible ink, and then you send
siren emojis.
You send a GIF to articulate what you're trying to say.
And then you add LOL at the end.
LOL, JK.
Hey, some feedback. You really need to. I'd love for you to change how you do this, LOL.
LOL at the end.
LOL is the worst way to end any statement because you just have no idea if they actually meant that or not. It's also a great way to make sure that no one takes anything personally. I hate you, LOL. You're a horrible person, LOL.
So it's for fake feedback.
Or if you just want to hedge your bet.
Well, I think honestly that's kind of a great point, is that sometimes when we're giving feedback, you kind of want to soften the blow a little bit, where it's like, hey, you kind of do this thing, but like, it's okay. Like, and you're just kind of scared. You're scared to receive it. So you're scared to give it to another person, and it's like, you just got to be, if you're giving someone, whether it's positive feedback, probably the harder form of feedback to give is negative feedback. You should be clear. You should be concise. you should be just straightforward with the person in front of you rather than trying to, beat around the bush a little bit and kind of soften the blow with it.
Yeah,
You're afraid of how
two
they're gonna
pieces of
feel.
advice that I received from a previous manager that were extremely helpful in how I give feedback. Where one, right, if you're in a work environment where you do performance reviews, is never let the performance review be the first time that someone's hearing that piece of feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And two, address feedback early so it doesn't build up into this huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull out my 5-paragraph essay on all the things that you did poorly over the last year.
Yeah, because now I'm like, well, how long have you been thinking about this and holding back? You could have told me from the beginning. I could have improved or done something different. Absolutely.
I think Gen Z is horrible at taking feedback. I think they
Tell us
are
more.
they are highly emotional. They are.
You're saying they as if we're not
are we
right
Gen
on.
Z? I think we're almost Gen Z.
Well, I still don't know how old I am. I'm 29. Last time I checked,
I think
might be 28.
one headline I saw was the cutoff was 95 was millennial.
That's right.
And 96 was Gen Z.
Which makes me Gen Z, makes you millennial.
Yeah.
So this doesn't apply to you, so you can just tune out. But I think Gen Z is a bit of a snowflake generation in that they take feedback, it destroys them. You have to just massage their ego. You have to give them all that. You have to make stuff up positively so that their identity is not too far destroyed. I think that's a huge problem. I worry about that for workplace, for our country, that we have a potential generation of people coming up that do not take feedback well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be a result of the family. There
For
could
sure,
be a
I
real
mean-
result of, to me, it's probably a result of hearing feedback when you were younger that you feel like didn't apply to you. Maybe your dad was too harsh on you. Maybe your mom was too harsh on you. And so now you just need everyone to affirm every decision that you've made in life so that you can feel good about yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure I need to be affirmed in how I'm living, and you need to affirm me. And if you don't affirm me, you are, a bigot, you are anti whatever I stand for. That's a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Yeah. I agree with you.
Good.
And I think you did a great job at delivering that piece of feedback.
It's a little.
I
was a
do
little
think
aggressive.
that you speak a little loudly and that you move a lot.
For what it's worth, you give me 5'9" energy. So
Hey,
Hey, I just think you guys need to stop doing that. Why are you moving so much?
that's actually my preferred way of public speaking. To shimmy.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. I ask that you please share what is some of the best, difficult, hard advice, a hard pill to swallow that you've gotten in your life down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends. Thank you for joining us. This is the All In Podcast. We'll see you on the next one.